Welcome back, everyone, for another installment of, well, I don't really have a show name. I guess it's just another update. Today, I'm going to talk about scenery stuff. I've gotten some comments about showing my scenery and some of the things I do. I thought I would touch on making my rock molds using some of the UltraCal that I showed in the video the other day, and then show you how I make my rock molds. Show you the end result of the rock molds once they're finished, putting them in place, and then show you how things are coming on the scenery that I've been updating. So let's switch over to the workbench and we'll get started on pouring rock molds. Okay, so to get started with the rock molds, I've got my UltraCal 30, which again you can use HydroCal, you can use plaster. The beauty of the UltraCal and the HydroCal is they don't shrink as they dry and cure, so you don't have to worry about the rock molds cracking as you take them out. Especially with the UltraCal, they won't crack because of how strong this is. Plaster, if you use like a plaster of Paris, they're going to be a little bit more brittle, and if you use like a drywall spackling compound or anything like that, those have a tendency to shrink, so you may get some cracking just from as the plaster shrinks as it dries. That's the nice thing about the UltraCal. So I've got the UltraCal. The mixing directions in the back here indicate 100 parts recommended parts of water per to 100 parts powder by weight. So it's UltraCal. It's 38 parts water to 100% of the UltraCal. For rock molds, I don't need a ton of mixed plaster here, so I'm going to go with I'll try and make it a smaller batch. Probably go with 1/3 of a cup and then slowly add water to it. I'll just take the water, add the powder into it. So I'll get a 1/3 cup here. Measure this out. Obviously you don't have to be super precise, but okay, so we got this measured out. I've got it says room temperature water. I go with a little bit warmer because room temperature in here is currently 60-some degrees in my basement. So this is actually more of a, probably closer to 80-some degrees. I go with a little bit warmer. It seems to help it dissolve a little bit better. So I'm going to have to experiment a little bit here since I have a 1/3 cup and I only have a 1/4 cup is the smallest I've got. So we'll go with a portion of this and then start sprinkling it in and start mixing. Okay, slight change of plans. Because I'm only mixing a smaller version, I usually use the larger bucket for large batches, but since I'm going to make a smaller one, I thought I'd go with this cottage cheese container instead. One of the things I have seen, I've never tried it, but you never want to dump plaster down the drain if you've got any left over, for obvious reasons, unless you're a plumber and you just like taking apart plumbing. This will solidify in the pipes and that'll be a disaster. But I've heard that some people actually will take a basketball and use that as a mixing bucket. Because then the beauty is then once you're done, you just let what's ever left over harden, and then you can take the basketball, flex it, dump out whatever you didn't use, and you've got a fresh, clean bucket or half a basketball to then use to mix the next batch. Actually, now that I think about it, I might try and find a couple different size basketballs, a larger one, and then maybe one of the miniature basketballs, cut them in half, and then you've got multiple size buckets. But these work okay as well. I've reused it. Try and crack all the dry plaster out. If you've got any in there, you really don't want to contaminate your new plaster. So add the water and slowly sprinkle in. Stirred in. Now this stuff does harden pretty quickly, and one thing I did read was that you want to try to avoid mixing it too much. The more you stir it, the quicker it's going to set up. So you want to try and get the consistency you want as quickly as possible and then get it poured into your molds to avoid it solidifying and getting to the point of unusable in your container. Looking at this, I don't think I made enough, but I'm going to start with it anyway. Alright, this is a really nice consistency. As you can see, it really just doesn't, it sticks pretty well. For rock molds, you might want to go a little bit soupier than this, but I'm going to start off with it just a little bit more soupy, see what happens, or a little bit more stiff, see what happens. So we'll let that set for a second. One of the things I have here, and I picked this tip up off of a model railroader video, so I'm not going to take full credit for it. This is just a box of styrofoam peanuts that I got, and then this is the rock mold, kind of dirty. But the styrofoam peanuts allow the uneven base of the rock mold to sit flat, and then you don't have to worry about it. This one's pretty level, but if you've got a larger mold, this really helps because you can settle it in once you've got it in there. So another tip that I picked up is to spray the rock mold. This is just my alcohol water mixture, but if you spray it a little bit, it helps the casting release once it's dry. I don't know how true that is, but I do it, you know, kind of one of those, I've always done it, I'm going to continue to keep doing it. Alright, so once it's in there, take your casting plaster, I'll cast it on the workbench here so you can see it, and just pour it in there. And I clearly did not make enough mixture here, so I have to make a little bit more. But then you just work it in. This mold happens to be multiple smaller ones, but I kind of like this one because then you can just mix and match the little pieces. So I'm going to need to make another batch here, so we'll come back after I make another batch. Okay, got batch number 2 mixed up here. This one's a little bit soupier actually, but I'm going to pour it in. As you can see, this one's pouring a little bit better. Pour it into all the different molds. Like I said, this one's individual, like smaller rocks, but I kind of like it because you can mix and match once you put them on the layout and kind of form bigger rocks by just using some of the Sculptamold to join the rock molds together, make it look like one larger rock. Now, you don't really need to smooth out the tops. You can if you want to. But what I do like to do once I've got everything cast is just kind of shake the molds a little bit just to work the bubbles up. If there are any. You can also see, I don't know if it'll show up on the video, but you can also see the plaster starting to settle into the mold a little bit. But if you can shake it a little bit, it'll help the plaster work into the detail of the rock. And it also brings bubbles to the surface. You know, it doesn't matter if there's bubbles inside the mold, but you definitely don't want bubbles on the surface of the detail because those will show up in your rock molds once you pull them out. It'll be a little harder to hide with paint and stuff like that. So once I've got it cast and I'm happy with that, most of the bubbles came out, just set it into the box with the packing peanuts. If you can see it here, let's see if we can just and then it'll just I set this on the side, and this dries pretty quickly, and again, you can take them out once they've started to cure, or you can let them dry solid. I prefer to let them dry solid, being that they're smaller. I think the larger ones you want to take out, and then you can sometimes mold them to your scenery. With these little ones, I usually don't have to do that, so I just usually leave them in there and let them cure. One thing I wanted to mention with using the UltraCal, some people like to mix the plaster with their hands just to make sure the lumps are out. That's fine, but you'll want to make sure that you use rubber gloves or latex gloves. It even says in the warning label here that it becomes very hot as it starts to cure. and it does. When it's in a container, you'll actually feel the container get warm. It's not like it's molten or really hot, but if it gets on your fingers, it'll start to irritate it, and even the powder itself, as it mixes with moisture on your skin, you can feel it start to get warm. So I do recommend only mixing this in a container, like I use just a spatula. If you need to use your hands and you prefer using your hands, I recommend gloves for it. So just FYI, if you do decide to use the Ultra Cal. Okay, so like any good cooking show, I had a batch waiting in the oven already prepared before I started this little segment. So I've already got some of them that I finished previously on the layout here. So I'm going to zoom in and just show you the end result. Okay, so here are some of the castings from that same one that I just used in place. Now to paint these, they come out. The Ultra Cal is a gray color, and not a whole lot of detail to it. It's just one flat color. So these I went ahead and I glued into place, just with some wood glue, and then filled in the areas around it with some Sculptamold, which I had been using already on the rest of the hilltops here. So you can see I went in, put one back there, and this is what I like about the smaller ones. It kind of gives you the ability to, without having to break them or anything, you can kind of come in and put them in where you need. Now, the downside is that if you have a larger area to cover, you'll probably want a larger rock mold to cover a larger area quickly. So let's touch on coloring real quick and how I went ahead and stained these. Okay, so what I went ahead and did, and this is another tip. My kids are older now, but I've had these for years. Newer baby food doesn't come in jars anymore. They come in these plastic containers, and I held on to them for years. Wasn't really sure why, but they've become great bins. For a previous video, I use them just to hold parts. I also use them for mixing containers and put water in here while I'm airbrushing. Put paint brushes in here and whatnot, but I also use them for mixing containers. So you can get Woodland Scenics. I know they make some staining for rock and wood and whatnot. However, I've also found that standard paints I got these from Michael's. I think you can get them from pretty much any art supply store. They're just your basic acrylic paint for crafts. They come in all your standard colors. I've got raw umber, I got burnt sienna, burnt umber, yellow, black, and then a gray color, country gray. And they're all different kinds, apple barrel, delta ceramic coat, folk art. Doesn't seem to really matter. So the first thing I do to get the color on the rock, I fill these up, and you'll want to work on your dilution of the paint itself. You're looking for a stain, so more of a transparent color. The hardest part about painting the rock is seeing the result kind of show through before you're done. As you're staining the rock, it's not going to look exactly like it is once it dries. So you kind of gotta guesswork a little bit and hope that what you're doing turns out. But the good news is it's really hard to ruin them. Rocks are so varied in nature that kind of in the end anything looks good. Unless you're going for a specific look for an area of the country that you're modeling, and you know that the red rocks, well, then you definitely need a red hue to them. But in the Wisconsin area, there's some granite formations, limestone, so you can kind of, you really can't screw it up, which is the beauty. So what I start with is a coat of a burnt umber or a raw umber, something along those lines, a brown. Just come in and you dab at the rock itself. I use a brush, just a broader brush, not real stiff bristles, and dab into the paint, mix it up, and then just start dabbing onto the rock itself. You don't want to necessarily brush it on, just highlight areas along each piece of rock. Clean the brush off, come back with a little silver, or a gray rather. I usually go with a little bit of yellow mixed with one of the umbers to get more of a lighter brown with a hint of yellow to it, sometimes even a straight yellow. Then once you're done, and I've used some gray and browns, I'll come back with a black wash, and this is a very diluted black wash, and this is just to get a highlight or low lights of the cracks and crevices and everything. Once the rocks are dry, some people recommend coming back with a dry brush of white just to highlight maybe where a piece of the rock cracked over time, erosion and things like that. I find that if you go with a light enough wash, sometimes the ultracal's color comes through and you excuse me, you get a natural white crack look anyway. So let's go back to the layout itself, and you can see where they've the staining effect that I've got. Okay, so this is the end result. As I said, those are the colors I used: a little bit of brown, raw umber, burnt sienna, raw umber, black, and some gray. And I don't know, honestly I kind of like the color. I like how it turned out. Again, for the area it works. So that's the end result of that. So that's the rock mold portion of this. As you can see, I also came through with my static grass applicator, and I applied quite a bit of static grass to this area. And maybe with the HD it'll show up a little bit better. But you can see I went through and did everything. What I do need to do, especially in this area, the static grass, I didn't put glue on these, which was on purpose. So I'm going to come back and vacuum off a lot of the loose static grass here. I hate to waste it, but that's the only way to get it out of here. So, and then I'm going to come back and do some other stuff. So let's clean this up and go back to the next step. Okay, scenery time. To get started, you need matte medium, you need a glue. I've never been real good at mixing my own matte medium. I know you can use wood glue, white glue. You can just get, I'm sure you can buy this matte medium from hobby shops and craft stores and things like that to mix your own. I, however, went ahead and just bought this gallon jug from Scenic Express, ready prepared matte medium. This has lasted me a pretty long time. The only thing is you can see that it does settle at the bottom, so you just need to shake it up a little bit. What I like to do is transfer it into, again, a nice trusty OxyClean container. Pour some into here. It's a little bit more usable. I've got a wide mouth container then, and then I apply it using, again, from when my kids were younger, a teaspoon dropper for giving them medication. You'd think my kids were sick a lot, but anybody who has kids knows that your kids do end up taking medicine. So I saved this, and it became an eyedropper. Again, of course, you'll always want to work with your alcohol and water mixture. This helps cut the surface tension of the water. It helps the matte medium to flow into the scenery material a little bit. So then I've got my scenery materials. This is a bag of decomposed granite that I bought off of eBay. I want to say I paid like $5 for this bag. A few pounds here. It's a little big for ballast. Maybe if you were an O-scaler, this would work. He had different sizes. He recommended this as HO scale. It's definitely a little too big for HO scale ballast. Each of these is probably the size of a HO figure's head. But it does work really well for riprap and for talus, and just at the, if you're doing a river or stream or something like that, this is really good for that. So I'm sure he's still on eBay. I don't know if I have his link, but if you search for decomposed granite for hobby Yeah, I think this is how you find it. And then of course I've just got different colors of ground foam and things like that. So let's get started. Okay, so I don't know if I like this effect, but I went ahead and I dropped in some of this crushed limestone or decomposed granite, and just to show, you know, maybe these rocks are crumbling. They don't look great at the moment, but once you spray them, it washes off the some of the dust and stuff like that, and they actually get a little bit darker, so they're going to match the color of the rocks a little bit closer. This tree is just set into place. I'm going to take him out of here. The beauty of the way I make my trees is you can see that some of the leaves will fall off, but that's okay, especially if you're modeling fall. Trees are dropping leaves all the time anyway, so if some of this falls off, glue them into place. Hey, you know, now somebody's got to come and rake them. So the first thing I'll do is just spray the area. I've got some stuff behind here, so I want to protect it, but I don't know if I'll be able to do that with the camera. So just kind of an overall spray. Once the static grass glue has dried, you can spray it pretty liberally, and you won't reactivate the wood glue. You really got to soak it to reactivate it. So then I just come in with some just some colors. Get some texture going in here. Then come back with some green, and this is a mixture of green that I did. It's got some a little bit of coarser powder to it, and then just some green in it. Now you could use a sprayer filled with diluted matte medium if you wanted to. I usually don't. I like to just get a little bit more up close and personal. So spray it again. And now with my eyedropper, I'll come back and fill it up and start dropping it in. And you can see that it really flows well with the glue or the alcohol water mixture in place. It really flows into the all the material. And again, as long as you don't soak it too much, the static grass that you've already applied will stay upright. It won't re-wet the wood glue underneath it all. And that's kind of the nice thing about doing the static grass the way I do. The wood glue is formed a pretty good shell underneath, so it doesn't reactivate and become fluid once again. Okay, I cut to the chase here a little bit, and again, like a good cooking show, I fast forwarded, so you got a picture that I went through, and I put in matte medium and glue in all of the areas here. The next thing I like to do is come back with a little bit of larger clump foliage, and it's just little bundles of it. Go ahead and using some wood glue, just pick random spots to put it in, and these can just act as shrubs, whatever else you want them to be. Again, I'm just kind of trying to go get a little bit of texture going on in this hill, just to give it some character, a little bit of something different. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll put these in, and to give them more of a fall effect, I'll come back and sprinkle some color on them. just to make it look more like they belong in the season that you're modeling. I also like to put some along the back of your backdrop just to hide the transition a little bit. Okay, so once I've got a bunch of them placed, I'll come back with a little bit of light brown. It's a real tan, fine coarse or fine ground foam, just to give it a little bit of color. Make it look like some of the leaves are dying and changing color. I'm going for more of a fall effect, so just trying something. Again, just to give it some texture. Give it a little variation. And now my personal favorite part, planting some trees. So we'll go ahead and glue the one that I had in. Just a dab of wood glue on the bottom. I already had a hole pre-drilled for that one, or pre-poked. So go ahead and put that one in there. As I said, when you work with hard shell, unfortunately you're going to need to use an owl or something to get below the surface. So I'll leave that there. And I've got a tray of ready-made trees here. I just made up a handful of them. And again, when I can, I'll get to a show on how I made these. I'd like to share that with everyone. Get that out of there. Put a little glue on the trunk here. See if I can find the hole. Something else you can do, these are some pre-made trees that I bought off of eBay, again, and they kind of came, as you can kind of see here, they were just this bright green color. So what I did was I sprayed them with the spray adhesive again, and then rolled them in some ground foam. Trees don't always change over immediately. They'll often transition. These aren't the most detailed trees in the world, so a lot of times what I'll do is just stick them in and use them as filler, just to finish a scene off, give it a little bit more color, varied sizes of trees. Okay, the last thing I do once I've got the trees planted, as I said, you've got your the leaves fall off. You can't adhere everything as much as you'd like. So I just did a quick spray with the alcohol water mixture just to wet things down, and then come back and kind of just at random spray in or drip in a little extra matte medium, kind of hopefully capture maybe some of the leaves that fell on the ground. Well, there she be. That's this corner of the layout. I guess it is what it is. Hopefully you like it. I think it turned out okay. Got the rock in there, and got the rock molds, some of the crushed granite, decomposed granite. I keep saying crushed, whatever. It's rock in there, some trees. I might come back and fill in a few more once I get some more trees made, kind of maybe some more shrubs, bushes, and things like that. But for now, I think this isn't bad. Well, thanks for sticking with me for another exciting episode here on YouTube. Hopefully you enjoyed what I did, maybe picked up a pointer or two. I can't promise anything. Again, no expert, just trying my hand here, trying to share what I do and what I've learned over the years. Hopefully you give it a shot. Again, please leave any comments you might have, hopefully all positive. Leave whatever comments you have. If you see something I'm doing that you think, hey, you could do it this way and it's a lot easier, by all means, please recommend it. Point me towards websites, tips, whatever. Happy to share. Next one, I think maybe be a little bit shorter. I'm going to ballast this area. I'm also going to paint the backdrop a little bit. Just nothing fancy. By no means am I a stunning artist or anything. But so maybe I'll go over some ballast, backdrop, and finish off the rest of the scene in here and see how things turn out. So thanks again, guys. If you're new, please subscribe so I can keep you up to date on what's going on. And thanks for watching.